Hey there, Advanced Math. All right, time to solve some multi-step variable equations. And just like when we solve kind of easier variable equations back in the 6th grade part of the year, strategy number 1 is going to be common sense. Always a good strategy and always one to rely on when you need it and when it works, when the problem's easy enough to do. So go ahead and make this your next title on your next free page. Close it up and concentrate with me. So speaking of 6th grade, let me bring you back to the common sensey kind of 6th grade problems. They were ones like this. So 3 times John's age is 27. How old is John? You can probably solve this doing no algebra of any sort. But I want to remind you how we set it up and how we solve these real quick because it's going to relate to what we do today. So the first thing we did was write an equation, and not an equation for the answer, an equation for the situation. Which is to say 3 times John's age. If I take John's age and I multiply it by 3, I get 27. And if I can find J, I'll know John's age, right? And so 2 strategies I taught you. One was common sense, which you can just basically, I feel, look at that and say, well, I know 3 times 9 is 7, so I know that J equals 27. And the other one was called the inverse operation strategy. And here's a reminder of how that worked. So I said, all right, 3 times John's age is 27. I want to know what J equals. So what I'm going to do to figure out what J equals is I'm going to look what happens to J in the equation and do the opposite on both sides. So I look at this and say, okay, so since here John's age is being multiplied by 3, I can find what J is. I can find what 1J is, just a J, by dividing that by 3, and also doing that on the other side as well. So basically, if I divide 27 by 3, which is what you did when the common sense, 27 divided 3 is 9. If I divide both sides by 3 because the opposite of 3 times J is divided by 3, then I get 3J divided by 3 is just J. 27 divided by 3 is 9. We also did those with like addition problems. So here's another similar problem, which is equal easy. John's sister's 18, which is 5 years older than John. How old is John? So again, I'm not going to write, 18 minus 5 is John. That's a equation for the answer. I want to write an equation for the situation, and I made you do that for reasons like today when we get to harder ones. So what I know here is that John's age plus 5, since his sister's older, John's age plus 5 equals 18. That's my equation for the situation. I want to find J. 2 ways I can do that. Common sense. 13 plus 5 equals 18. I know that. So J equals 13. Or that inverse operation strategy. So I'm going to take my equation and say, all right, to find J, to get J on one side of the equal sign by itself, I'm going to say, all right, well, if J has 5 being added to it to get 18, plus 5 is what's happening to J. So subtracting 5 is the inverse operation. So I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides, which is what you did in your head to get 13 to begin with. 18 minus 5, 18 minus 5. You knew that, but just remind you, we're doing that because the opposite of adding 5 to J is subtracting 5. And I get J is 13. John is 13. So that's how we did these back in the 6th grade part of the year. We're going to add some complexity to the situations today. So let's look at this one. Sean sold 4 more boxes of candy for the school fundraiser than Marta. The sum of the boxes they sold was 22. How many boxes did Marta sell? Okay, so we're going to start today with the common sense strategy. So the main thing to be able to do today is write an equation for the situation well. Again, and this one's a lot harder to just write an equation for the answer. So I'm going to focus on the situation. So I'm going to use, there's 2 people in here. There's Sean and there's Marta. And like I could just use two variables and say Sean plus Marta equals 22, but I can't solve that. I can't figure out two variables from one equation. You know, these could be 1 and 21. These could be, 2 and 20. Could be 3 and 19, and so on. Lots of combinations. So I don't want to have two variables. I want to have one variable. And since the question asks about Marta, I'm going to have Marta be my variable. So I have Marta plus Sean equals 22, but I have some information about one of these. So I know Sean sold 4 more boxes than Marta. So instead of writing Sean with an S, I can also say, well, since he sold 4 more than Marta, that's the same as Marta plus 4. And if I replace Sean with another Marta variable, then now I don't have 2 in the same equation. I just have Marta. So I've got Sean's Marta plus 4 plus Marta's what she sold. If I add those together, that adds up to 22. So that is a good equation for the situation. M plus 4 equals 22. Or if you wanted to combine these like terms here, the two m's, you could also replace that with 2m plus 4 equals 22. Either one of these would be okay. I think the common sense strategy is a little easier from this. So I'm going to leave it here. So now all I have to do is use common sense to figure out what m is. So I've got some number added to itself plus 4 is 22. So if these equaled 18, 18 plus 4 would be 22. So that would each be 9, I think. So if Marta sold 9 boxes, Sean sold 4 more, that would be 13. And just to check, 9 plus 13 is indeed 22. So that was common sense. Once I had a good equation, it was common sense to figure out what the variable was. So remember too, solving an equation, when you say this is the equation, solving an equation means finding what the variable equals. We've been dealing with expressions for a long time. You can't do that in an expression, but in an equation you can do it. All right, open your notebook. Let's do one together. All right, it says Matt is 32, which is 2 years older than 3 times Brittany's age. Write and solve an equation to find Brittany's age. All right, so we're going to focus. If we write a good equation for the situation, we're likely to be in good shape when we try to solve it. All right, so Matt is 32, which is 2 years older than 3 times Brittany's age. So it sounds like what I'm hearing, if I multiply Brittany's age by 3 and add 2, 3 times older, 2 years older than 3 times Brittany's age. So if I triple her age and add 2, I should get Matt's age, and I don't need a variable for Matt because Matt's not unknown. Variables are for unknown values. Matt's age is known. So if I triple Brittany's age and add 2, I should get 32. So that's writing the equation for the situation. Now I feel like common sense makes this pretty easy. Triple something plus 2 is 32. So really, if I could make this be 30, 30 plus 2 is 32, then I would know that B, so I got 3 times something is 30, then I know that B equals 10. Just common sense for me. And so I wrote the equation, and then I used common sense to figure out what the variable had to be. That won't work every time, but in lots of equations, if you just stop and use some common sense, you can figure out the variable and find your solution. So Brittany is 10. Okay. That's how these work. We'll do a couple more tomorrow. If this is tricky for you, and writing the equations especially is, writing an equation is one of those many things I talk about where it's easy when I do it, and you can look at it and say, oh yeah, I see how he did that and he did good. It's a lot harder when you have to do it. So if you need to look back at these examples and think through how to write that equation, because tomorrow you're going to have to write the equation and do the find it yourself. I think the finding part's not too bad. Writing a good equation can be a lot easier when you watch me do it than doing it yourself. Okay? But once you feel like you got a handle on it, you've got some good examples in your notes, you are all set, and I will see you tomorrow.